Speaker, I move that the West Coast Windblown Timber Conservation Lands Bill be now read a second time. Mr Speaker, I want to thank members for their contributions during the first reading of this bill. It comes down to a very simple question: whether we should allow timber that was blown down in huge quantities in Cyclone Eta to be recovered. That's the issue. And what I found extraordinary, particularly in the contributions from the opposition, that I heard a whole lot of personal abuse. I heard called every name under the sun. I heard all sorts of comments about solid energy and all sorts of things. What members did not address, fundamentally, does it make sense to recover the wood that has fallen over in great volume in Cyclone Eta? And members on this side of the House are absolutely clear in our position that it is sensible. Now, the member who's interjecting, I have to say that I've been in this House for 24 years, and what we just witnessed was something quite extraordinary. Not one, but two members voting against their own party. And what that shows is the level of dysfunctionality, the extent of division within a party that in just 3 months' time seeks to be the government of this country. Mr Speaker, if they can't resolve their position on something as simple as being able to use dead trees on the coast for some jobs, how on earth are they going to be able to resolve the complex issues involving the governance of this country? Mr Speaker, they are in disarray, they are in a mess, they don't have a bolter's hope of being able to run a sensible government. Mr Speaker, I do want to note and comment on a few of the issues of substance. First of those, why, Mr Speaker, is it necessary for Parliament to move with pace if we're to sensibly recover this wood? Well, it's very simple, Mr Speaker. It's called sapstain and it's called borer. It starts in spring. That is just 8 weeks away. Equally so, Mr Speaker, every member of this House would know that the recovery of wind-blown logs is an exercise that needs to be done with care and with safety. And every day that this House delays halts the work that needs to be get on and done around how this timber can sensibly be recovered and recovered before it deteriorates. And that is why this House is dealing with this matter quite properly with urgency. Mr Speaker, I have quite deliberately provided a terminator clause. This is not a permanent change in the Conservation Act. It is not. What I have said is that we are going to commission research as a consequence of this extraordinary event, independent research, to enable us to compare those areas that timber is recovered from with those that timber is not recovered from. And on the basis of that, we may make a better informed decision about whether on a long-term basis we should allow such recovery. Mr Speaker, one of the most extraordinary features of the debate is an amendment that's been tabled by the member for West Coast Tasman. And the amendment says that companies from the West Coast registered area should only be allowed to have access to the timber. Now that's odd. There's a large company, in fact the largest sawmill is owned by a company called Westco Lagan. Its registered office is in Christchurch and always has been, as my colleague from the West Coast says. Well, what an extraordinary law to get into the business of saying, oh well, that company that has backed the coast, that's employed people on the coast, is going to be discriminated against in where Labor stands. And I just am gobsmacked, Mr Speaker. Are we really going to have members saying that the natural gas that comes out of Taranaki can only be used in Taranaki? That the dairy products that are produced in one district can't dare be moved to another district? Are we going to be telling the people of Nelson that the apples that are produced in Nelson can only be used in Nelson? If you want to wreak havoc on the economy, Mr. Little, that is the sort of loopy parochialism, protectionism that you would put into law, and I cannot believe that a party that seriously wants to be considered for the governance of this country would even table such a foolish amendment. Mr. Speaker, I want to deal specifically with the RMA provisions in the bill, because what we could do is pass this bill, allow the Director of Conservation to be able to give authorisations, and then for those participants that want to recover the timber to then have to go to both the Regional Council and the District Council to get a resource consent. And they would then have to publicly notify those. They would be subject to appeals to the Environment Court. Now let me give a simple example. We know a member of the Greens opposed the Bathurst mine. How long have they, under the Resource Management Act, been able to slow down consents? Well, I'll tell you how many times. There have been 32 court hearings over the application by Bathurst to mine on conservation land in the West Coast. Are members on this side of the House prepared to allow that sort of circus to occur around in respect of the recovery of this timber? Well, the member, Mr. O'Connor, says that I was the minister. Well, let me remind him, the application for Bathurst to mine the Denniston Plateau was lodged prior to us becoming the government, and this government has repeatedly tried to amend the Resource Management Act, and the member who's screaming, who pretends to stand up for the West Coast, has opposed every single one of those RMA reforms. And I'm not prepared to make a joke of this legislation by misleading the people of the West Coast, saying they're going to be able to recover this timber and then have them tied up in months of bureaucracy and red tape with the RMA. Mr. Speaker, I have confidence that the Department of Conservation, as they're required to do under this bill, will ensure that the recovery of that timber is done by minimising those environmental effects. Mr. Speaker, those that oppose those provisions are effectively saying they have no confidence in the Department of Conservation staff, and they're wrong, and it will be done well. Mr. Speaker, this is a sensible bill. This is a sensible response to an urgent situation, and again, I commend the bill to the House.
Question is that the motion be agreed to. Before I call the next member, I wish to draw the House's attention to a correction on the announcement of the vote on the first reading. On a recheck of the numbers, I will declare the result as 72 ayes and 46 noes. So the record will show that correction, and I call the Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.